On September 7th, Ukraine marked its Day of Military Intelligence, the day officially set aside to celebrate and honor the achievements of its Defense Intelligence Unit, or DIU for short. To commemorate the event, the DIU released a documentary entitled 33 Years on Guard, which in its own words is a story about the people who have been at the forefront of the struggle for the freedom and independence of the Ukrainian state for more than 3 decades. Indeed, the DIU has been at the heart of Ukraine's ongoing resistance against Russia's invasion since Russia first crossed onto Ukrainian soil in 2014. It's been deeply involved in many crucial aspects of Ukraine's fightback and has been responsible for some of Ukraine's biggest successes during the war. In fact, if anything, its role has become more pronounced as the war has dragged on. As DIU head Kirilo Budanov noted in his address to DIU personnel on the special day, "Today our activities have become more active and innovative, but no less mysterious." Let's take a closer look at the DIU, its evolving role in the war, and how its actions continue to thwart, disrupt, and wreak havoc on the Russian military. To start with, let's clear up a little confusion about the abbreviation by which this influential wing of the Ukrainian military is known. If you've been following the Russo-Ukrainian war, you've no doubt seen the DIU widely referred to as the GUR or HUR, but these acronyms aren't entirely correct. Officially, the agency is called the Main Directorate of Intelligence of the Ministry of Defense of Ukraine, which is abbreviated by Ukrainian letters that translate into English as HUR. However, in both Ukrainian and Russian, the first letter can be pronounced as either G or H, depending on the word, which is where the GUR abbreviation comes from. Although both terms are used widely, including throughout the Ukrainian media, for English speakers the correct abbreviation is actually DIU. The DIU was established from the existing intelligence assets of the Kyiv, Odessa, and Carpathia military districts of the Soviet Armed Forces and its main intelligence directorate, the GRU, following the dissolution of the Soviet Union and the emergence of an independent Ukraine. Originally, 2 separate intelligence agencies were established: the Intelligence Directorate of the General Headquarters of the Armed Forces of Ukraine in February 1992, and the Strategic Military Intelligence Directorate of the Ministry of Defense in September of that same year. The existence of 2 separate agencies handling similar tasks but reporting to different authorities proved to be inefficient. So the following year, the 2 agencies were merged by order of a presidential decree, and on April 14, 1994, the new agency was renamed as the DIU. Later in 2001, the agency was given the status of a special government authority. Within a year of its establishment, the DIU was already making its presence felt in no uncertain terms. In 1995, the DIU played a key role in repelling Russia's first attempt to consolidate control over Crimea through the so-called President of Crimea, Yuri Meshkov. Following Ukraine's declaration of independence in 1991, the majority ethnic Russian Crimean population held a referendum on autonomy. The question was, do you support re-establishing the Crimean Autonomous Soviet Socialist Republic as a subject of the Union SSR and a participant of the Union Treaty? With a voter turnout of over 81%, 94.3% voted yes. A flurry of diplomatic and political upheaval followed, culminating in a President Meshkov being elected in 1994. The Ukrainian government denounced the move as unconstitutional, and ultimately, in no small part due to the work of the DIU, the Republic of Crimea was abolished by the Ukrainian parliament in 1995, and Crimea was returned to Ukrainian sovereignty. That same year, DIU intelligence officer Mykola Vakolyad, serving as a commander in the Ukrainian peacekeeping contingent in Bosnia, negotiated with Bosnian Serb leader Ratko Mladic during the siege of the Zepa enclave. His actions contributed to the evacuation and rescue of over 10,000 Bosnian Muslims who would otherwise have faced massacre, similar to the Srebrenica genocide that had taken place shortly before. DIU officers also participated in security and peace enforcement in Iraq as part of the International Coalition of Forces from 2002 to 2005. During that mission in 2003, Russia attacked Crimea again, starting construction of a dam on the Tuzla Island in the Kerch Strait. Again, thanks to the operational work of DIU officers, the second Russian annexation attempt of the peninsula was thwarted. According to the DIU, its toughest time came during the period 2010-2014. Pro-Russian President Viktor Yanukovych had been elected in 2010. According to the DIU, he appointed Russian agents as heads of the Ukrainian Ministry of Defense, and they systematically degraded Ukraine's military intelligence apparatus. By the time the civil war following 2014's Maidan broke out in the Donbass, an interstate agreement was signed with Russia, which prohibited mutual intelligence activities. As a result, the DIU did not have sufficient data on the Russian army, its movement, and concentration of forces near the border when the Russian-backed Donbass separatists broke away from Ukraine and the shooting started. As the DIU puts it, DIU officers had to restore the agency's combat capability at an insane pace and promptly gain vital intelligence data to stop the Russian offensive. Throughout that civil war, which continued in varying stages of intensity from 2014 until Russia's full-scale invasion in 2022, the DIU was heavily involved and distinguished itself on numerous occasions. On several of those, senior DIU officers gave their lives or were seriously wounded in the heat of battle. Arguably the most notable contribution of the DIU during that phase of the war came during the protracted battle for Donetsk airport. At the onset of the war, the DIU unit commanded by Colonel Maxim Shapoval had been collecting evidence of Kremlin aggression and data on the deployment of Russian artillery. It conducted operations in the enemy's deep rear and distinguished itself in battles for the Savoy-Mihaila strategic height. The unit then found itself at the forefront of the battle for the airport and was responsible for its initial liberation, becoming known as cyborgs due to the intensity and precision of their fighting. Shapoval was killed in action in 2017 and was posthumously awarded the Golden Star, Order of Hero of Ukraine, for his bravery. A special reserve of the DIU, led by Shapoval, was named after him. Another DIU senior officer who gave his life in battle and was posthumously awarded the title of Hero of Ukraine during this period was Senior Lieutenant Yevhen Zelensky, although his surname bears a similarity to that of artillery, FPV drone strikes, and close-quarters combat. DIU reported that the equivalent of more than 8 Russian companies were lost. A few weeks later, on August 28th, the Ghost Special Unit hit a Bayan-M corvette armed with Caliber missiles in the Sea of Azov, first disabling its radar and then damaging its hull, forcing it to abandon patrol. A few days after that, the DIU was rewriting the history books again. This time, they launched an FPV drone from more than 217 miles away, striking another Bayan-M and setting a world record as the first recorded strike of its kind on a warship. In the last couple of weeks, the DIU's teams have given particular focus to radar and air defense installations in Crimea. The first raid, led by the Ghost Special Unit, obliterated several high-value assets, including an S-400 radar and a GLONASS space tracking dome. Days later, DIU followed up by knocking out systems including Nebo-M and Podlik K-1, creating temporary blind corridors in Russia's air defenses. Then on September 5th, the DIU published multi-angle footage of a Black Sea raid it had carried out in August. The drone had destroyed Russia's BL-680 assault boat, a Harpoon B radar, and a Groza electronic warfare unit. The operation underscored DIU's capacity to combine intelligence, technology, and surprise in a single night of strikes. Moreover, the Russians don't seem to be quite sure how the DIU is pulling these Crimean raids off. Some of the attacks seem to be conducted with drones that aren't supposed to have the range to reach Crimea from Ukraine. The speculation on Russian channels is that either the DIU is using new drones with extended range and stealth features, or perhaps that they're using a form of naval drone mothership. Such motherships could be used to carry attack UAVs close to the Crimean coast by sea before they're launched remotely into Crimea, all the while being controlled from back on the Ukrainian mainland. Given the DIU's close collaboration with foreign counterparts, it's perhaps unsurprising that the DIU's activities extend well beyond Ukraine's borders. The most famous of these activities actually predates the Russian invasion and took place as far afield as Afghanistan. During the chaotic evacuation of Westerners after the Taliban took over the country, the DIU was dispatched to evacuate all Ukrainians on the ground. On August 22nd, DIU officers had to literally grab Ukrainians and other citizens by the necks to pull them out of the crowd into the Il-76MD aircraft being used for evacuation. Altogether, 83 people were saved. Then, when planned attempts by the Canadian military and the US Department of State to evacuate Canada's Afghan workers came to naught, Canada asked for Ukraine's support. The second DIU operation to rescue interpreters was conducted on the morning of August 27th, a day after the last Canadian evacuation aircraft took off from Afghanistan, and just a few hours after a terrorist attack near Kabul airport killed at least 170 Afghans and 13 US soldiers. As a result of this operation, 29 people, certain to be executed by Afghanistan's new government, were rescued. Then in February 2024, the DIU released video footage showing officers from its Timor group interrogating Russian prisoners from the notorious Wagner mercenary group in Sudan. That followed a video showing Ukrainian drones taking out Russian mercenaries and their local terrorist partners, also in Sudan. The DIU is generally extremely tight-lipped about its overseas operations, although these operations fit entirely with Budanov's vow in May 2023 to destroy Russian war criminals anywhere in the world, wherever they are. The DIU has also been implicated in a couple of more controversial events abroad. In August 2024, the pro-Russian West African nations of Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger petitioned the president of the UN Security Council to denounce the Ukrainian government's open and assumed support for international terrorism, particularly in Africa's Sahel region. The move followed comments by Ukrainian officials suggesting that Kyiv had played a role in attacks by Tuareg separatist rebels that had caused the deaths of many Malian soldiers. The attacks had taken place the previous month in the northeastern village of Tinzawa-10. Andriy Yusov, the spokesman for the Ukrainian Defense Ministry's intelligence services, had stated that rebels received the necessary information they needed to conduct the attacks, after Malian army allies of Russia's Wagner Group confirmed losses in the clashes. Mali and Niger later severed diplomatic ties with Ukraine over the incident. Earlier this year, following Iran and Israel's short but highly destructive war, the Iranian Tasnim news agency reported that 3 DIU intelligence officers had been apprehended. They were allegedly planning an attack on the Shahid aviation industry manufacturing plant near Isfahan, Iran, which designs and manufactures a range of drones, including the notorious Shahid 136 and its Russian variant, the Garan 2. Tasnim said that the 3 men had appeared before the Iranian Supreme Court and were sentenced to death by hanging, with the execution expected to be carried out within 2 weeks. However, to date, no execution date has been announced. Given the damage and the cost that these drones have wreaked on Ukraine, it's perhaps understandable why the DIU will be taking advantage of the chaos caused by the so-called 12-day war to deal a serious blow to their manufacturing. But still, these military operations in foreign countries fall outside the bounds of international military law and, as observed in the case of Niger and Mali, can lead to disadvantageous diplomatic and political outcomes. More confusing still in terms of ethics and international law are the assassinations of multiple high-ranking Russian military officers inside Russia, in which the DIU has been implicated. A prime example is Lieutenant General Igor Kirillov, then head of Russia's nuclear, biological and chemical defense forces, who was killed by an explosive device planted on an electric scooter in Moscow in December 2024. This operation, along with those of first-rank Captain Valery Trankovsky and missile specialist Mikhail Shatsky, is believed to have been carried out by the SBU, with the DIU playing a central role in planning and execution. You may feel these military officials got what they deserved, as many do. Others feel that these kinds of operations only open the Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. It's unclear whether they are, or rather were, related. On June 17, 2014, in the heat of the war, Zelensky's group from the 8th Separate Special Forces Regiment was tasked with liberating Aidar Battalion volunteers from separatist activity. The officers completed their task, but they were ambushed while making their getaway. Zelensky personally covered the withdrawal of an armored personnel carrier hit by an enemy shell, shielding his fellow occupants from the explosion with his body. A week later, he died from wounds at the Kyiv Military Hospital. He was just 23 years old. There are many more tales of DIU ingenuity and heroism from this period that we could tell. Suffice it to say that by the time the civil war had devolved into a full-blown Russian invasion in 2022, the DIU had grown to become a serious burr in the saddle of the Russian armed forces, to use its own description. These days, it would probably be more accurate to describe it as a row of razor blades in the saddle, rather than just a single blur. As the war has evolved from more traditional maneuver-based warfare into a combination of attritional and asymmetric warfare, the DIU's role in Ukraine's military endeavors has expanded. Today, the DIU analyzes and provides intelligence to the Ukrainian leadership and collaborates with the CIA and MI6. Its wide-ranging activities include battlefield intelligence, raids behind enemy lines, naval drone warfare, and cybersecurity operations. Or as Budanov put it during the address we quoted earlier, we expose the Kremlin's plans, find the weak points of the invaders, weaken their capabilities, and undermine military and economic potential. In today's high-tech world, we manage to carry out asymmetric actions. Enterprises, ships, and airfields of the Russian Federation shudder from our attacks. We are destroying the enemy's military infrastructure. As we'll see shortly, the DIU's actions he's referring to speak louder than his words. But if a picture is as good as 1,000 words, nothing speaks louder about what the DIU is about than its emblem. In 2016, the HUR emblem was changed to an illustration of an owl plunging a sword into Russia. The owl itself is clearly a dig at the emblem of the Spetsnaz special forces of the Russian GRU, the DIU's direct adversaries. The GRU's emblem depicts a bat, a natural prey of the owl. The implication is clear. To rub it in even further, the Latin motto on the DIU's logo, Sapiens Dominabitur Astris, translates to "The wise will rule over the stars." The GRU's motto is "Only the stars are above us." According to the DIU website, their motto is the answer to the GRU of thousands of Ukrainian intelligence officers whose names we may never know, but thanks to whom Ukraine has been defending Europe against the Russian bear for 8 years. Needless to say, the new emblem was met with outrage from Russian journalists and politicians, with some calling it a provocation. Before the full-scale Russian invasion in 2022, the only field reconnaissance unit of the DIU was a special unit subordinated to the Directorate's 4th Special Intelligence Service, the 10th Separate Special Purpose Unit based in Kyiv. But under the leadership of Budanov, who took over from Major General Vasil Berber on August 5th and will only turn 40 in 2026, the agency has grown in leaps and bounds. By the start of 2025, the DIU commanded 9 reconnaissance battalions and a reconnaissance battalion training center, and at least 20 different Spetsnaz or Special Forces units. These include some legendary names from the war that you'll probably recognize if you've been following the war on the channel, such as the Ronin Team's Sniper and Reconnaissance Company, the Shaman and Nobody Battalions, and the Kraken, Ghosts, and Timur Special Purpose Units. Also under the DIU umbrella is the famous Group 13, the naval drone specialists credited with repeated strikes on Russian ships, helicopters, and jets that have inflicted more than $500 million worth of damage. The unit's activities are aptly summed up by DIU spokesperson Andriy Yusov. In many cultures, the number 13 is considered unlucky. For Russian occupiers, it certainly is, he said. But arguably the most recognizable of the DIU's combat formations is the International Legion. In its own words, this specialized unit brings together professional military personnel from around the world to defeat enemies of freedom. The Legion is comprised of volunteers recruited from around the world, primarily military veterans from over 50 countries, operating with significant autonomy and largely self-funded. The unit participated in key battles across Ukraine, notably Kyiv, Kharkiv, Mykolaiv, Kherson, Zaporizhia, Severodonetsk, and Bakhmut. But those are far from the only battles and theaters where the various DIU units have made and are still making a telling difference. On the very first day of Russia's full-scale invasion, DIU fighters alongside the Ukrainian National Guard and others defended Hostomel Airport in the Kyiv region. Russian paratroopers had been sent to seize the airfield as a springboard for an assault on the capital, but fierce resistance prevented Moscow's plan to take Kyiv in 3 days. Later in 2022, DIU Special Forces, along with other Ukrainian military agencies like the Security Service or SBU, famously took part in the liberation of Snake Island. The moment when the victorious Ukrainian forces planted the Ukrainian flag has subsequently become a symbolic act of victory. By the summer of 2023, the DIU's activities had widened in scope, particularly as drones became a dominant factor both in terms of reconnaissance and battlefield dominance on the front lines and behind enemy lines. To be sure, their subterfuge and intelligence operations remained a core part of their operations. In August 2023, for example, the DIU carried out Operation Titmouse, where they persuaded a Russian Mi-8 helicopter pilot to defect, bringing sensitive information about Russian aviation and a cargo of jet parts with him. The elite Group 13 then became central to Ukraine's successful campaign to force Russia's Black Sea Fleet to flee from Crimea to relative safety much further east along the Russian Black Sea coast. Group 13's naval drone campaign proved deadly, striking Russian ships including the Ivanovets corvette, the landing ship Cesar Kunikov, and the patrol ship Sergei Kotov. With increasingly sophisticated NATO-supplied and homegrown technologies becoming available, Group 13's naval drones only increased in lethality. In December 2024, its Magura drones destroyed a Russian Mi-8 helicopter in Crimea, the first ever recorded case of a naval drone destroying a helicopter. In May 2025, the same unit made history again. They downed 2 Russian Su-30 fighter jets over the Black Sea with drones armed with air-to-air missiles, the first time in history that naval drones had shot down fighter aircraft. But Group 13 is just one of DIU's units dealing serious damage to the Russian army, especially of late. In early August, the Timur Special Unit halted a Russian advance in the Sumy region, conducting deep raids behind enemy lines supported by